Okay, we will go ahead and get started with our panel. So yeah, we have Rosa, Jade, Harriet, and Jess here with us today to talk about all things conferences. I am just going to get each of our panelists to do a little intro. If you could share your name, your current background / role, and then maybe a little bit about your speaking experience. Memorable conference you've spoken at or your favorite conference to attend. Let's get started with Rosa.
Hey everyone, my name is Rosa. I'm right now in Madrid, in Spain, and I work as a programmer in 37 Signals. I've been there for 9 years already. It's an eternity in tech years. And I started speaking at conferences about a decade ago, and it was because I had something really challenging to implement at work. It wasn't in this job, it was in my previous job. And I had been fighting with implementing in-app recurring subscriptions for our Android apps and iOS and Windows phone apps and stuff. And it was very, very challenging, like crazy, like why is this so hard? And not finding anything online about that, I decided to turn my experience into a talk. So I submitted it to a generic conference called Code Motion. It's like a generic tech conference software related, not Ruby, and it got accepted. So I freaked out, and then I gave that talk. It was called The Recurring Nightmare. So yeah, that's it. And since then, I've spoken at quite a few conferences and local meetups as well. And I was talking with Jess that we have this channel in the community that is called CFP Working Group or something like that, that is a bit quiet. And we were thinking of it needing a little bit of life into it, like bringing a little bit more structure. I don't know how it will look like, but I'll try to be more active there. And I'll be happy to help anyone like reviewing their proposal for CFPs or brainstorming ideas or anything you need. So I'll try to be a little bit more available there.
Thanks, Rosa. Jade, do you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. My name's Jade. I'm from London. I'm a senior software engineer. I've just started a new role at Dentally, which is dental software, and working on kind of appointments and booking within that. In terms of conferences, I have spoken at RubyConf a couple of times, broadly in performance and scaling, tracks, and I've also spoken at Brighton Ruby, and I was a CFP mentor for RailsConf 2025. And yeah, I just like giving talks. I like kind of like Rosa, kind of sharing stuff where I found something difficult and hopefully give people the ability to do that and maybe try something new as well. So yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Jade. Harriet, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Harriet. I am also based in London, fellow Brit with Jade. I am on the Rails infra team at Shopify, and I've done a few speaking bits and pieces. I think people probably get sick of me cropping up here and there, but I was very happy to start my sort of conference journey as a junior, which I think changed my outlook slightly, having felt very happy to have that opportunity at Helvetic Ruby a few years ago now. And then, since then I've done a few different conferences, was MC of Rails World Amsterdam last year, and I'm going to throw in the Rails in Focus YouTube videos, which not strictly a conference, but I realized how terrifying they were because it's a bit like having a conference audience of like the internet. So giving a kind of technical talks on that level was sort of bit of a baptism of fire, but we got through it. Various different technical speaking experiences on this end as well.
Thanks, Harriet. Yeah, highly recommend checking out that YouTube series. Those videos are great. Jess, do you want to finish us off?
Yeah, thanks, Adriana. So I was a teacher for 10 years before transitioning to code. Also, Harriet was, so I'm just going to shout out Harriet because, being a teacher is hard. But I like teaching, so that's why I kind of started wanting to do conference talks. It's basically that, but no students talking back. Wonderful. And then last year I just started speaking. So I spoke at 3 conferences last year: Helvetic Ruby, Baltic Ruby, and Brighton Ruby. So yeah, started off strong, and just gonna hopefully keep on this conference train because it's very fun. Would recommend.
Amazing. So welcome to our panelists. I know, Rosa, you talked about this a little bit, but do most of you remember the first conference talk you gave and what conference it was for? Jade, do you remember what yours was?
Yeah, I do. It was first conference talk was React Boston in 2019, and I was comparing the Elm architecture with React and how it's done with Redux, that kind of thing. And then since then, I've just done Ruby talks, slightly more my wheelhouse.
Super cool. And then Jess, you said your first one was last year. Is that correct?
Yeah, last year mine was at Helvetic Ruby, and it's kind of like a deep dive into Active Record. I did give a version of that talk actually at a WNB.RB meetup, and then a more in-depth version of that after getting some really good advice from the conference organizer doing a dry run to go more into the Rails source code to make it more applicable for seniors, which was amazing advice. So I was super glad I did that because it made the talk way better.
Amazing. Harriet, how about for you?
Yeah, first also was Helvetic. My talk was I remember submitting my CFP weirdly in a little cafe in I was in somewhere in maybe Munich. I had this bit of a travel emergency, and I was kind of oh no, the CFP deadline, and I was submitting my CFP really quickly in this weird cafe by Munich station or something strange. It was and amazingly it got picked up by Hannah, who is so supportive of particularly juniors, because at the time I was only 18 months or even a year into my career. I also am a career switcher, as Jess said. So having that first opportunity, as I kind of alluded to earlier, really changed my outlook. I think lots of people probably feel it's a bit intimidating to get started, but I was really grateful to have because I'd already got one under my belt very early on. It's well, any one can only be better than this, right? I've got more experience and I'm more confident, so that definitely changed things for me, I think. But yeah, there are small, friendly, nice, or smaller, friendly, nice conferences out there. Helvetic's a really good example, Jess just called it out as well, where they are really welcoming to first timers, and that was a big game changer for me.
Yeah, love that. Junior or early career devs have so much to share. So yeah, I'm so glad to hear that you had such a positive experience and that it's, now you're such a pro. Rosa, I know you said it was 10 years ago that you did your first talk. Do you remember what that thing you were working on at work that was difficult and that kind of turned itself into a talk? Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, it was mostly a mix of absolutely insane documentation that made no sense, a lot of undocumented behavior, edge cases. It was a mix of, at that time, I was not very, I didn't think I could give a talk. Not that give a talk, but I never thought I had something to tell, something interesting. I didn't consider me an expert on anything, or any novel thing. So this theme, because it was so strange and so full of edge cases, and nobody seemed to have everything, there was no place where all this information was. I thought, okay, maybe this could be useful for someone. So it was just that, that lot of so many things that I couldn't find anywhere, and some of them I discovered by trial and error. And yeah, so that was the part. It was a very dense talk, a lot of content. But it doesn't. Then later, when I started attending a lot more conferences, I realized that it didn't have to be that way. You still can have things to say and you don't need to discover new things that nobody else have told before. Like you can say it's the same things in a totally different way that make them click for other people. So, but anyway, it was a long time ago, so that was it for me.
I love that. Yeah, does anyone else on the panel have any advice for someone who maybe wants to give a talk but feels like they don't have anything to talk about, or they're not sure what would make a good conference topic? Yeah, Harriet, go for it.
I'm going to try really hard to remember something that I've been trying to remember for about 4 years. And it was when I was at this stage, as I was saying, like just before the crazy transport issue outside Munich station, I was having a bit of a back and forth with the amazing Emily Samp, as many of you know from this community, who is always just such a wonderful source of mentorship and a huge vault of knowledge. And I was sort of saying to her, like, you know, I'm so early in my career and like, I don't really know if I'd really like to do this. And I don't really know if I have anything valuable to contribute. And she sent me this absolutely amazing set of bullet points, which basically I think just came from her brain because she is so fantastic. She has all this advice. And this is back in the day when we were on Slack, and it got erased from like human history. And I've always been trying. I was like, Emily, can you remember what you said? And she's like, no, I can't remember. But I get it. It was great. It was like like Aladdin's cave of like amazing information. But I do remember some of it, and some of what she said was like, really think about the thing which you are the expert on. What is the thing that you are best placed to talk about? Like, what is the thing that you have the experience in that no one else does? The kind of like central point of like, I've got this experience in this, and I'm also the expert in my own sort of personal journey on this, and therefore I am the most authoritative voice on it. So like, not necessarily suggesting that like everyone here is, an amazing authoritative voice on active record or whatever else. It's almost not that. It's like, what do you have a really unique perspective on that makes you an expert? And that was really game changing for me, because what I kind of went away and I thought, well, actually, I think I've probably mentored more like career switcher juniors or whatever, than even at that point as being kind of an old junior myself, than anyone else has, almost, because I taught about 300 career changes by then through the wagon. I was like, well, I bet most people don't know 300 career switches. So I'd kind of like use that as like being an authority on that thing. And you can normally find a sort of an angle in which you're a specialist. Like, you're the only person, for example, that's had to implement like a specific thing at your company, presumably, right? Like, no one else has that insight into your specific company, without obviously, giving away too many trade secrets. But maybe you're a complete expert in like your particular like process and implementation on this thing, and that's a useful thing to share with authority. Like, no one can question that, right? So that was like mega helpful, because it moved me out of a like, how have I possibly got more to say than like Aaron or whatever. It's almost not that. It's like, what am I more knowledgeable on? What am I authoritative on that like no one else is? Does that sort of make sense? But ask Emily also.
Yeah, that's amazing advice, Harriet. I think it's easy, to fall into the trap of being like, well, I'm not an expert on everything to do with Ruby and Rails, and so like, what right do I have to like get up on a stage and speak? But yeah, so many people have different experiences working on different things, or like maybe you can provide a unique perspective, or maybe you're able to kind of speak to a more junior developer's experience, and that's really going to connect with folks in the audience who haven't been doing Rails for so long. And so yeah, that's super awesome advice. Jade or Jess, do either of you have anything you want to throw in?
Yeah, I've got two things. I think first off, definitely agree with everything Harriet said, and that's something I always think of. To complement that, I also think if there's something that really interests you that you want to learn more about, but you haven't like made time to do it, a conference talk is a great excuse to do that deep dive, which is what I'm doing at the moment. And then also, this one does spike a bit of fear in me, but whenever you spend like days or hours or weeks on but it could have been like minutes or hours. If you had like known something, that could spike up like a bit of imposter syndrome. You're like, oh, obviously I should have known that. But it's not obvious, because if it was obvious, you would have known that. So like anything that you discover that's like a quick, could be maybe not a quick win, but like a win that's worth sharing, or even just how you came to that solution, which is also a talk I'm working on. Because I spent weeks on a Rails, months on a Rails upgrade. That should have taken seconds, because I just missed like one line of code. But I learned a lot about encryption on the way. So I'm going to share that, you know, and that could make a good talk.
Cool. Thanks, Jess. On the topic of imposter syndrome, did any of you have to kind of work on overcoming initial fears about speaking, or yeah, do you have advice to share around how to like not be super in your head about giving a conference talk?
I'll go because I've got a funny perspective on this. I don't really have fears when I'm presenting to like a public audience. I do get super nervous, and I've worked on this presenting to my colleagues. So like, if I don't really really know the room, I'm like absolutely fine. And then people I know, my team, I'm like sweat it, all of that. So I think it's just to do with, for me, I think it's to do with like what I feel like the consequences are. And I feel like there's people are just really nice usually. So for a public talk, I'm usually fine, but I realize that's unusual.
I think for me, one of my biggest fears is just being wrong. Like I'm just going to be on stage and say something that's just wrong. So I do loads of run throughs with people who are far more skilled and experienced than I am. So if none of those people catch it, probably I'll be all right. Probably there was nothing wrong. So just getting lots of feedback, I think, has really helped me.
Yeah, I identify completely with everything you've both said, Jess and Jade. I think it's like so identifiable to feel that. And I also get very nervous. But also I think there's a thing, isn't there? Like when it's worth kind of remembering, like when we're at conferences, like watching the stage, like how often do we ever say, or like I certainly don't, like look there and go, oh, there's a mistake there. Like if you can follow it that closely, quite often it's like that's quite unusual, right? Because you're seeing slides of code like so quickly, you're hearing concepts probably for the first time, and you're like, oh, but that like it's very unusual that I am like so close to a solution that somebody's got that I can spot a mistake, even let alone kind of, or like follow it, let alone like that closely, let alone spot a mistake. And I also think that even when people, like if people see a mistake in it, they're more likely to question themselves, I think, than question, I don't know, again, perhaps this is me as a woman, but I probably am more likely to question myself, maybe it's my personality, than immediately think like this person was wrong. And even if they are, I think I'm quite unlikely to go and tell them. So I suppose you've got those layers of like protection if you think about kind of the likelihood of what is going to happen. Only once have I ever had like a follow-up to anything I've said, and it was actually my least technical talk. I had somebody like write a whole blog post about it, which is one of my favorite dinner stories ever. And that person has like subsequently like come over and tried to be friends with me at subsequent conferences. It was a bit of a strange move from them, but it's fine. I think it was kind of meant with a fairly good humor. But like the more technical stuff I've done, like no one has ever poked any holes in it, even though there may well have been holes to poke. So I guess that's, I suppose, in some way comforting.
Amazing. Thank you all for the insight there. I want to talk a little bit about CFPs, or call for proposals. Does anyone have kind of a process for how they brainstorm and put together CFPs? And yeah, maybe if someone can just share a little bit about like, what does a CFP usually entail? What is that process like for submitting one? Does someone want to get us started? Yeah.
Okay. You go ahead.
And then Jade.
Okay, sure. So in terms of what a CFP looks like, I think this is reasonably clear, but it's your application to the people who are selecting talks to say what your talk will be about, and to an extent sometimes make the case as to why you should give that talk. So RubyConf in 2021 had like explicit sections where they were basically saying like, justify why you personally should give this talk. I can go a little bit into detail about that, but that tends to get anonymized. So it's an interesting writing exercise where you have to like really back yourself, but also not just be like, and I work at company name, therefore, because that will be blanked before they see it. In terms of, I don't know about, in terms of coming up with ideas, I usually just, it's obvious to me what the idea will be, but in terms of how you write it, there is a very, very helpful blog post by Sarah May called What Your Conference Talk is Missing, which is basically going into, from your first draft, like look at that and think about your audience more than about you as the person giving the talk, and like directly address what they will get from your talk. I think the other important thing to note about CFPs, you do not have to have written your talk. When I first applied to a CFP, I was like, oh my God, I've got to write the whole talk. And then I realized I didn't. And so I just kind of like did what would be like an essay plan and based my application off that.
Cool. Thanks, Jade. Rosa, do you want to share?
Jade explained perfectly what a usual CFP is like. At a minimum, I think you need to write an abstract, perhaps the one you will find if your talk got picked, the one you will read in the program of the conference, and that should be attractive to people who will attend, maybe, and then a longer description. And what I found it had worked for me has been to target the abstract and the description and everything, target that a lot to the conference by watching videos from previous years, reading the program in previous years, like what did the talk look like how was the tone, what kind of topics. I think this is like if the same way you will target your job application to the company you are applying, it's kind of the similar thing. And the other thing that I've seen work also from the perspective, I've been in the program committee of a couple of 3-4 conferences, and one thing that really works is trying to show your personality a little bit, because sometimes you read a lot of proposals that look the same and you cannot tell them apart, like they could have been written by the same person, because they are very neutral, very bland a little bit, they are very, you couldn't tell them apart. You read them and then you don't remember. But the ones that show a little bit of personality, something different, I think they tend to, even if it's not big for any other reason, but I think it tends to get the attention of the reviewer, I think.
Yeah, that's great advice, Rosa. Rosa and I did program committee together for RailsConf last year. And it's always like seeing someone who's, having fun with their abstract and like finding ways to be creative. It's really cool. So don't be afraid to, show some personality and have some fun with the CFP. Harriet, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, funny you should mention RailsConf. It's like a sort of few layers back. I was just thinking, firstly, that it's really good to circulate your CFP around and get useful people to read it through and help you and suggest ideas. And again, that's another reason why, as Jade said, it's you don't have to write it all. You almost don't want to write the whole talk, because you want to be able to have bullet points and send it to somebody who's super generous with their time, and then they'll say, oh, actually, like this bit's really interesting, but like that bit's a bit like been done already, and then that might really change the shape of the whole thing, right? So like that's useful. And there are so many folks who are super generous with their time. And sort of on the generous with your time thing, it literally just reminded me that I went to the like RailsConf ran a workshop I just looked it up in my drive. It was literally like pretty much to the day, like this time last year. And they ran this amazing workshop where you could go and like bring your CFP. And I think obviously RailsConf is no more, but these kind of things crop up from time to time and they're really useful. And they gave some great advice. I was just reading through my notes from the session and like a lot of what Rosa just mentioned, but things like it should be entertaining first and informative second, right? I thought, which was really mind-blowing to me, because they were like, yeah, we don't want, like, nobody comes to a talk and is like, oh, fantastic, like 60 minutes of code on a white screen, right? That's not what people are there to have, like, information delivered in an entertaining way. So like to try to find, like to let your personality come out and to try and find like a hook, or, like do stupidity like I did at Brian Reevy last year with Lego on stage, or anything that is like, a bit different, and to hook people in so that it's not 60 minutes of just watching, like code after code after code is what's going to really sell your CFP. And one of the things they said they really didn't like was like people kind of trying really obviously who are just there for sort of sponsorship reasons or like stuff like that. Like it's, if you're there, or like someone there just to sell a product, like that's kind of what they're not really after mostly, but is more kind of trying to kind of, they gave the impression that they really like, individuals or something kind of interesting to say, which like I'm sure we all are here, which is great.
That's great advice. Thanks, Harriet. Does anyone have any last do's or don'ts about CFPs? Sounds like do have fun with it and do try to make it engaging and appealing and not just super technical. But yeah, does anyone have any kind of last thoughts there?
I think it's kind of mentioned. Oh, sorry, go for it, Jade.
Harriet reminded me, I found my notes from when I was a CFP mentor for RailsConf last year. There was some, I think maybe Rosa, might be able to speak better to this, but I've got some notes that Noel Rappin gave on like what the committee does, like what the committee's looking for. So it was to do with, they had, I think this will vary between conferences, but they had like a 3-step rating process. So the initial one is totally blind. Then later on, there was a kind of unblinded step where they would try to make sure that they didn't just have all presenters from the same company. And I think at the blinded step, they could look for things like, there could be things like you have a perfectly good conference talk, but it's very, very similar to one that they had the year before, even if it's not the same exact topic. So that might be something. So it's good to look back over kind of previous years. But I think Rose might be able to speak better to this because I've just got notes where she's actually on the,
Yeah, that seems correct. Yeah, that was for RailsConf.
Yeah, kind of building off that, I think I often choose the conference first and then come up with a CFP, because then you can just really make sure that the vibe of the conference is a vibe you want to be a part of. Baltic Ruby had like a junior engineer track, so I knew a talk that was like really focused on junior engineers would be probably gratefully received. Thankfully I was right. The talk Dalma and I successfully submitted for RubyConf Austria is that conference is musically themed, and when we heard that, we're like, should probably submit a CFP, and now we're both going to be playing clarinet to various degrees of amazingness on that stage. So yeah, choosing the conference and thinking about how you can write a talk to that, I think could be a good way to go about it.
Yeah, let me say something about that one. I was in the program committee for that one, for RubyConf Austria, and your talk was the one I gave the highest grade. We have to grade the talks, and it was also an anonymous, but it was the best for me. It was the best submission of all the over 100 that I reviewed. You will be surprised how many talks didn't have anything to do with music, which I was surprised because I was expecting more like targeted, like some of them were completely generic talks with nothing. I don't know. I was a bit disappointed.
Yeah, that's great advice. If the conference has, tracks or themes, like you definitely get points for sticking on theme. So super cool. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how you go from like a CFP or an abstract to then like maybe a 30+ minute full talk, and how you kind of figure out what story you want to tell. Harriet, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what that process looks like you, or if you have a process, or kind of what goes through your mind in those early stages of developing a talk?
Yeah, interesting. I was just trying to work it out as you said that. I think I sort of start with the fun hook thing and then build out from there. Just thinking about like Brighton Ruby, like I wanted to do something with, it was a talk about concurrency. And I knew I wanted to do something as Jess, as a former school teacher. My life used to revolve around Lego bricks of some description. It was like, how can we like shoehorn Lego bricks into this activity that we're doing on Mozart or whatever, right? But it was like Lego, and so I wanted to do something with Lego on stage in like a live demo, just to bring it to life a bit. It's quite, I think, concurrency threading, it can maybe feel a bit dry, and then everything sort of was built out organically from there. So I sort of worked out how to bring each bit back. Like when you've got a strong idea that you want to be quite central, it's fairly straightforward, I think, to sort of almost like offshoot from that all the way through, and you can kind of keep coming back to it. I think that was one evolved just as an example. But and I think maybe the other thing to mention when you're, I'm sorry if this is jumping forward to a bullet point you wanted to do later, Adriana, but I think the other thing that comes with the expanding out to 30 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever, is the code element. That like, are you live coding? Are you not? And like that, as I did a lot of teaching of code in the early days of this career, and one of the very early on things that for me was like, I'm gonna try and not live code at any point, because I used to hate watching somebody live code, because invariably what happens is, like, even for somebody who's super experienced, it's like coding is not a spectator sport, is it? Like something breaks and then the whole thing blows up, and then you're like, oh, excuse me while I just look up the documentation. And that's really boring for a room full of people, right? And we obviously don't want that extra level of stress while we're standing in front of 800 people, or even 100 people. So it's like actually making sure that those clips were video, like screen captured. And then once I had them in, it's like, well, that's a very specific then amount of my, it's like, I'm going to make bullet points to kind of talk around like what's going on in this demo after I've clicked play on the slide. And so that starts to kind of give your 30 minutes a lot of like body, if that kind of makes sense. Once you've got those bits in, it's like, okay, so then what am I saying to set that up? What am I saying to kind of like, is the takeaway from this? And then you've got these big events that your talk is kind of built around.
Yeah, that's great, Harriet. Definitely like a good tip that, like, with video, you can almost kind of replicate the experience of live coding without the actual stress and like risk that comes with, like writing code in front of a live audience. Cool. Does anyone else want to talk about kind of their process for developing talk?
Yeah, I'll go. I think for most talks I've done, I've actually written a full plan for the time, so I follow that plan. I try to give the kind of theoretical background and then also examples, like specific examples. And then the other thing I do is I set myself a sort of false deadline that is a local meetup or an internal talk at work, where I give a version of the talk as I have it so far and then get feedback. With work, that relies a lot on your audience knowing the specific tech. So for example, I gave a talk to mostly Go engineers and I got some feedback that like the examples don't really make sense for these people. So that's good feedback as well. And then the other thing is you can kind of give I mentioned that I would give theoretical background and then go into examples. In a drafted talk that I did at the London Ruby user group, I didn't have the examples. I was like, imagine the examples are here. And then the audience are very nice, usually. Like, people are just helpful. So that both gives you a target, so that when you're taking your short plan and kind of chipping away each day and writing more and more words, putting together more and more slides, you have a artificial deadline. It would be great to be those cool people at the conference who say, yeah, I'm still writing my slides, but realistically, bit by bit, get some feedback, give yourself the confidence that you've like practiced and delivered the talk for the most part already.
Yeah, being able to dry run a talk and get feedback is super helpful. Sometimes things that are clear to you because you're like so deep into kind of a problem space, it becomes apparent that like maybe that isn't super straightforward for the average audience member. So yeah, being able to dry run is a great tip. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about like day of actually getting up on stage and giving a talk. Does anyone have tips for either like, yeah, kind of dealing with nerves on the day of, or just like how to kind of keep your audience engaged? Any tips for like stage presence, that kind of thing? Jess, does anything come to mind for you?
Yeah, I had the unique opportunity to give the same talk twice. So I submitted the same CFP for Helvetic Ruby and Baltic Ruby, thinking neither would get accepted, and both did. So I told Baltic Ruby, I was like, hey, I'm giving this talk like a month earlier. Is that okay? And they're like, yep, that's fine. Like, change it if you need to. Like, cool. So the first time I gave the talk, it was completely scripted. So I was very nervous. So I had my speaker notes. I was behind the podium. And I basically just read my script. And I felt very comfortable with it because it was all there. But then I got feedback afterwards that it was like, oh, it was like a bit like a story. And I wasn't sure because you're reading. But then like I kind of got into it. And like mostly like they loved the content. But then I had feedback from one guy. He was like, yeah, it wasn't really good though, was it? Because like, you want to be out on the stage and like feeling the vibe and improvising. Like, but you couldn't do that with your talk. Like it's too big a talk. There's too many animations. I was like, well, watch me. So then for Baltic Ruby, I completely memorized the talk, was in front of the podium, no speaker notes. And if you watch the Helvetica talk, it's super boring. I watched it back and I was like, oh, this is hard watch. So I think if you can watch your talks, really valuable. And I learned that like that's not the style I want. Like the style that's more me is in front of the podium, is knowing my material so that I can improvise and make jokes from things I've heard. But I think finding what your style is, like what you'll be the most comfortable and confident presenting, is probably what's most important to figure out.
Yeah, that's great advice, Jess. Yeah, not feeling pressure to like speak in the same way that other people necessarily speak, and just finding kind of what works for you is great. Harriet, go ahead.
I'm gonna say two things about wardrobe. Actually, I hope I'm allowed to say bra on this recording. Hopefully that's okay. But if not, please, Adriana, like censor me at this point. So it was the day before Brighton Ruby. I was just like, everything's, got to the hotel, everything was all right, and I just kind of like shut my eyes to go to sleep, and I had this kind of like, like sudden like electric shock of like, oh my god, have I thought about the fact that I'm wearing like a white t-shirt on stage? Like, have I thought about that yet? And I kind of like sprung out of bed and put all my clothes on, and like for the next day, and just to check, and I was like, oh no, I feel like this is going to be too see-through. And so like I suppose my thing is like, don't forget to plan all the stuff around as well. Like, it will be a weight off your mind. Otherwise you'll be like lovely Jess Sullivan when I like ran down at breakfast the next day and was like, Jess, like, do you have a bra I can borrow? Like, it just, yeah. So like, don't neglect those things. I ended up like queuing in Marks and Spencer's in Brighton at like 7:45 in the morning to try and find a replacement bra. But yeah, so that, and actually the second thing I have on wardrobe is that like, the absolutely like incandescent, amazing Amanda Perino, who obviously runs the Rails Foundation and the brilliant Rails World. She it was really had loads of like stipulations for wardrobe for the MCs anyway, before when we were planning that. And at the time I was like, what an interesting thing to think about. But actually it made complete sense. Like she was saying, don't have dangly earrings, for example, because of the microphone, don't wear heels, don't wear skirts. And like some people, I don't know, like I guess, you know, what you feel comfortable in is important, but also, you know, that you might decide you don't want heels to worry about getting up the stairs. You might decide you don't want a skirt if you're standing on a stage. So like just thinking about those things a bit ahead of time is actually, it just takes that level of additional stress away, so you can just concentrate on like doing a kick-ass job on stage. And yeah, remember to pack a bra. That's I definitely will sort that out for next time.
Yeah, that's great logistical, practical advice, Harriet. Rosa, how about for you? You've been giving talks for 10 years. You've keynoted. Like, do you still get nervous getting up on stage and speaking?
Yeah, I get so nervous. Like I cannot even eat before. if I have a talk earlier, it's okay, but late in the day, I usually starving when when I'm on a stage and sweating, and it's awful. I get super nervous, and what I also think a lot about the clothes I'm going to wear. I want to see the stage and the light to get an idea of what will work. Then I regret it, and it's a nightmare. I don't think it gets easy, but what works for me while I'm doing the talk, just to try to try to calm down, is usually to see in the audience and try to find a friendly face, so I can look at them, and the kind of people that smile and nod, and so I just try to focus on that few people. And if I see someone that is half asleep or looking distracted, I ignore those people and just focus on the. So also now when I'm public, which is like when I attend conferences, I try to be the nodding smiley person for the speaker. So
I love that. Thanks, Rosa. Okay, we're going to do one more question, and then I will open it up to anyone in the call who wants to ask a question. But yeah, last question. Have you found that speaking at conferences has had an impact on your career? Like, yeah, how has it kind of changed your career, the way you approach your work? Harriet, do you want to go first? I see you nodding, so I'm going to pick on you.
I want to dive in. My partner is actually an actor, and he said something really early on when we first met. He said something about like building a brand, and I kind of went, oh, like that's just actor stuff, like whatever. But then the more I've thought about that, I'm like, actually, that's really relevant to everyone's careers. I think, like particularly in this sort of day and age of like, you know, everyone's presence online. And it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, if you're not comfortable speaking publicly, that it's not the be all and end all. There's other ways of doing that. There's maybe like recording things, or like even just, you know, blog posts and stuff like that. But I think increasingly in the world of work, like building a brand around yourself is only beneficial. And yeah, I've been incredibly fortunate having some great opportunities in the last 4 or 5 years. And yeah, I'm super happy that I've now got to a place in a team that I always really, really wanted to work in. And I think that is by and large because when I showed up for the interviews, they already knew who I was because like, oh, you're the YouTube woman and you're the like MC woman. And so I think, you know, it can't hurt, even if you think it was a complete disaster and the projector exploded and everything went wrong. At least you've separated yourself from just like a blank name on a bit of paper, and you've got that kind of slight brand around who you are. And I think that's only gonna help your cause when you're going for that next step in your career.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Harriet. Does anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah, I'll go. I mean, I think even as a senior engineer with lots of experience, I think men will still get the assumed they can do the job. Having the conferences under your belt, you tend to in conversation get a bit of, oh, that's cool. Oh, so you really know about this. Oh, you're an expert in this. The other side of it, I have literally used it in a salary negotiation once. and it was effective. Won't really go into details. I don't think you can do that every single time for every single job, but that was good. And then there are like, outside of like direct career related things, there are things that are just fun, like meeting other speakers at the conference. Getting to meet Matt was a really cool one at RubyConf in Chicago. So there were just like fun things as well. So I was like serious.
I love that. Yeah, I think for me, like starting to speak at conferences was such a confidence booster to be like, okay, I like went up and did that, and it was really hard and really scary, but like I can do hard things, and just having that like extra bit of self-belief. Okay, we have like 5 minutes left, so I want to leave some time for audience questions. Does anyone in the call have anything that they want to ask any of our panelists about speaking? Yeah, go for it, Doma.
Yeah, I have 2 questions, but I'll just start with one and give other people a chance. I'm really curious. For me, one of the like scariest thoughts about giving a talk is like, I don't feel like I'm an expert on anything. I do feel like I have some expertise on some topics, and I have, you know, strong opinions about some things, but how do you deal with the feeling of getting up, like maybe the fear of getting up on stage and like feeling like you're not an expert?
I'll go. I think this is actually going to very much echo what Harriet said earlier, from Emily's advice to her. I got advice when I was going to be speaking at React Boston from Richard Feldman, which basically you don't have to be. This was, you know, I wasn't the expert on either Elm. I wasn't involved in the writing of the language, and I wasn't on like the React or Redux teams. He was basically saying like, you have a unique experience going from Elm to React. Talk about like what your experience is. So you don't need to explain every single bit about each architecture, just like what your experience is. And I think that you kind of are the expert on that. If you don't consider yourself the expert in the wider industry. I hope that kind of helps a bit.
Yeah, definitely. That does help, because you are the expert of your own experience and no one can really argue with that. So that's actually a really helpful perspective to have.
Harriet, do you want to add something?
Yeah, super quick. I was just gonna maybe even just put a bump on that last bit of, even maybe we just throw the word expert in the bin, right? Because it's like a really terrifying word, and like it maybe even there are like, you know, Rails core contributors who might not consider themselves experts. Like I think perhaps if we let's just chuck it out and let's maybe think about another term like unique story. You know, what do you have a unique story about? And then that then feels a bit more useful, doesn't it? As like a potentially, or maybe there's better language people can think of, but yeah, thinking about that instead, suddenly that barrier I think gets removed.
Yeah.
Go
That's
ahead.
very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Doma. Yeah, go ahead. Kishia, is that how you say your name?
Yes, Keisha. Hi, everyone. First off, I just want to say thank you for all the knowledge. As somebody who's junior in career transitioning, I absolutely love this. And this is so important because I recently applied to the RubyConf as a scholar, and I'm hoping I'll get it, but I'm also very terrified. So to get back to a little bit Dallas' point, and for any of you who started even as a junior and started into conference talks, did you feel like that somehow boost your confidence or helped you in any way in your career? Or if you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently, I guess? And I think, Harriet, you had quite a bit of experience in that area. In a sense.
Yeah, so sorry, did you say my name at the end?
Yeah, I think you mentioned you started that very early as well. I'm not sure if anybody else did.
if anyone else wants to jump in, please do. I don't want to like monopolize the floor, but yeah, I think it will undoubtedly be incredibly helpful for you. If nothing else, like it helps you get familiar with also the other people who are doing these talks. So like that level of networking, it's just a bit easier as well to be able to come up to somebody and say like, oh, I really enjoyed your talk, and they'll say, oh, I really enjoyed yours, and then that conversation, like the kind of connections and the friends I've made, even just like asking Jess for a bra at breakfast, that became the beginning of our like friendship and our professional connection and all the rest of it. So like you make those connections much more strongly, I think, as well, from putting yourself out there, which again, that's so helpful as you go through your career and you start to learn like the shape of the industry and who's out there.
I think there's a lot to be said for giving a talk as a junior. Like that's only gonna be so much more impressive. And I think it's so helpful to see non-senior engineers on the stage. Unfortunately, that's no longer me. Sometimes I'm like, well, I don't think you need that word on there. And it's also just so important to get more not men on the stage. So like that's a really big part of the reason why I keep putting CFPs in there, because I think I want to see not men on the stage, and I can't ask other people in the community to do that if I'm not doing it myself. So I think those two things are amazing. If you can do it, awesome.
I would also say, I would add to that, I started speaking as a junior, just doing like there was a London Ruby on conference, and I put myself forward to do a talk at one of those. So like meetups can be a good entryway as well, and you've still like spoken at a meetup. That's still impressive, and many people are so afraid of public speaking they won't do that either. So you could start with that as well.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, just to jump on what Jade said, if anyone wants more practice giving talks, come speak at the WNB.RB meetup. Send me a message, and we'd be super happy to help support you there. Cool. Okay, we're at the top of the hour, so I'm gonna wrap us up here. But huge thank you to Rosa, Jade, Harriet, and Jess for being here with us today and sharing all of their advice and tips for conference speaking. There's a conferences channel on the Discord, and there's also the CFP channel that we'll try to revive. And if you are looking for feedback or just want kind of more help like getting going with the CFP, definitely hop in there. But thank you to everyone for coming out today, and have a great rest of your week.